The first glimpse of Earth. In the vast expanse of the Milky Way, civilizations stretched across countless star systems, each with its own history, culture, and ambition. Among these, the Zarian Empire had emerged as a dominant force. Its fleet of sleek, biomechanical warships prowled the cosmic seas, imposing order through sheer military might. Their advanced technologies were unparalleled, and their ruthlessness in battle had earned them both fear and respect throughout the galaxy. But despite their power, the Zarians had yet to encounter a challenge they couldn't control. Until now. At the heart of the Empire's decision-making lay the Imperial Council, a group of esteemed officials who wielded supreme authority over military and political matters. The Council's headquarters, a massive floating citadel above Zeron Prime, was a place where the fate of entire worlds was decided with the flick of a hand. High Commander Vexera stood at the center of the Council chamber, her iridescent scales shimmering under the chamber's cold blue light. Her tall, imposing figure was surrounded by other members of the Council, each an expert in their field, each driven by ambition and power. The tension in the room was palpable, the air crackling with anticipation as Vexera prepared to reveal a plan that would change the balance of power across the galaxy. Esteemed counselors, Vexera began, her voice steady and commanding. I bring before you today a proposal that will ensure our dominance over this entire galaxy. A plan that, if executed correctly, will solidify the Zarian Empire as the supreme ruler of this arm of the Milky Way. The holographic displays around her flickered to life, revealing star charts and tactical readouts, but it was the image of a small blue planet that captured everyone's attention. The planet was Earth, a world that had long been dismissed as insignificant, barely worth noting among the hundreds of star systems that had been mapped and charted by the Empire. But to Vexera, Earth was a prize beyond compare. She allowed a pause, letting the gravity of her words settle over the room. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Earth, a backwater world in an unremarkable solar system, barely out of its pre-industrial age. This couldn't be the plan. Counselor Zakar, an elder strategist with many decades of experience in galactic warfare, spoke first. Commander Vexera, he said, his voice tinged with skepticism, with all due respect, why should we waste our resources on this primitive world? There are far richer, more advanced civilizations to conquer. Why should we bother with a planet that has barely mastered radio communication? Vexera's mandibles clicked together in amusement, her dark eyes gleaming with calculated intent. Ah, Counselor Zakar, you misunderstand the brilliance of my proposal. It is precisely because Earth is insignificant that it holds immense value. She gestured to the hologram, where the image of Earth zoomed in to show sprawling cities, vast oceans, and dense forests. Earth is ripe for the taking. It is defenseless, isolated, and filled with untapped resources. But most importantly, no one will expect us to strike there. It will be the perfect distraction. A murmur of surprise rippled through the council chamber, and Counselor Zakar narrowed his multifaceted eyes in thought. But, Commander, the humans are weak. Their technology is laughable compared to ours. What is the point of subjugating a species that can barely defend itself? Vexera's smile widened. Exactly. Their weakness is their strength. No one will suspect us of targeting such an inconsequential world. And once we have control, we will exploit their resources, enslave their populations, and cripple the resistance of any who dare oppose us. We will strike swiftly, before they even have time to react. The room fell silent as the counselors digested her words. The idea of targeting such an insignificant planet seemed absurd at first, but the more they thought about it, the more they began to see the potential. The Zarians could conquer Earth without any real challenge, leaving the rest of the galaxy none the wiser. The element of surprise was a weapon more powerful than any fleet could muster. Vexera continued, her tone unwavering. We will send a small, specialized force to Earth. We will infiltrate their governments, disable their defense systems, and capture key locations. Within weeks, Earth will be ours. And when the rest of the galaxy finally realizes what's happened, it will be too late. Counselor Zikar still looked unconvinced. And what of the humans? What if they surprise us? What if their primitive species proves more resourceful than we expect? Vexera's smile softened. That is where the true brilliance lies. Earth may be weak in technology, but the humans possess something far more dangerous: creativity. In their limited capacity, they have managed to survive against odds that would have crushed any other species. They may not have the technological might we possess, but they have ingenuity. And it is this ingenuity that will be our greatest asset. The council chamber fell into silence once more. Vexera's words were powerful, and the councillors began to reconsider their stance. The Zarian Empire had always prided itself on its intelligence and tactical superiority. Could this new approach, a strategy of subtlety and surprise, be the key to an even greater victory? After several tense moments, Councillor Zikar finally spoke again, his voice filled with reluctant respect. "Very well, Commander. We will proceed with your plan. But know this, if anything goes wrong, the blame will fall squarely on your shoulders." Vexera nodded. "Understood. Prepare the fleet. We leave for Earth at once." As the council session came to an end and the members filed out of the chamber, Vexera stood alone, staring at the holographic display of Earth. The plan was set in motion, and the fate of an entire world hung in the balance. The human response. The Zarian Empire was methodical in its approach. Within days, the first steps were already in motion. Their fleet, a shadowy force of sleek biomechanical ships, began its journey toward Earth. The mission was clear: infiltrate, dominate, and seize control of a planet that had long been overlooked by the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. What the Zarians did not anticipate, however, was the fierce, unwavering resilience of humanity. Back on Earth, things were far from quiet. Humanity, in its early days of space exploration, had already begun to push the boundaries of its capabilities. They had yet to achieve faster-than-light travel, but they had mastered many other technologies that gave them an edge. The early signs of alien contact had not gone unnoticed. In fact, there had been whispers among global leaders, scientists, and even the average citizen about strange occurrences in the sky, mysterious signals, and unexplainable events happening across the planet. Some dismissed these as mere rumors, the fanciful imaginings of conspiracy theorists, but others were more cautious. People like Dr. Elena Armstrong, a brilliant astrophysicist working for the United Nations Space Exploration Program, UNSCP, had been studying unusual signals from space. For months, her team had detected strange radio emissions coming from deep space. They were unlike anything Earth had ever picked up before, not the usual static from distant stars, but something deliberate. Dr. Armstrong sat in her office, reviewing data that had been sent to her by one of her colleagues. The numbers on the screen were impossible to ignore. They indicated that something large, something extraordinary, was heading directly for Earth. But it wasn't just the proximity that concerned her. The energy signatures were like nothing Earth had ever encountered. Technologically advanced, far beyond human capabilities. Who would send a fleet this far? She muttered, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she ran simulations. The answer, she quickly realized, was clear. Someone was coming, and they were coming with purpose. As Dr. Armstrong sent the data to the top brass of the United Nations and the Global Defense Coalition, GDC, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that humanity was unprepared for what was about to unfold. She'd spent years studying the stars, learning about the vastness of space, and yet nothing could have prepared her for this. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the planet, a different response was taking shape. Alex Ramos, a former soldier turned civilian contractor, was living in the desert in New Mexico. After years of serving in the global peacekeeping forces, he had retired to a quiet life of contract work, far removed from the action. But like many others, Alex had noticed strange events, lights in the sky, unmarked craft moving at speeds too fast for human technology to match, and a growing sense of unease among those who had access to classified information. One night, as Alex watched the stars from his porch, his phone buzzed. It was a secure message, marked as high priority. The message was short but clear. Deploy immediately. Earth is under threat. You know what to do. The words struck him like a blow. His instincts kicked in, and without hesitation, he grabbed his gear and headed to the nearest military base, ready to mobilize. He wasn't the only one. Across the globe, former military personnel, scientists, and government officials were receiving similar orders, and they knew what it meant. The time for ignoring the rumors was over. The threat was real. Back in the heart of the Zarian fleet, Vexera watched Earth draw closer through the holographic projection before her. The humans were still blind to the impending danger. Their technology was primitive, and their defenses were laughable by galactic standards. Earth had no way of detecting the advanced systems of the Zarian ships, nor did they have the capacity to counter an invasion on this scale. The Zarians had calculated every detail, every angle. The attack would be swift, decisive, and over before Earth even realized what hit them. But there was one thing Vexera hadn't accounted for: the human will to survive. In the United Nations Space Exploration Program headquarters, Dr. Elena Armstrong sat in a high-tech control room, nervously monitoring incoming data from telescopes and satellites. The images on her screen were troubling. Though the Zarian ships were still too far to be seen clearly, their presence was undeniable. The detection grid they had set up in orbit had registered unknown vessels moving at impossible speeds. Earth's earliest warnings had been dismissed as false alarms, but now there was no denying it. The world was about to change. "It's them," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the hum of the machinery. Across the room, her colleagues were frantically analyzing the data. General Martin Herrera, a military strategist working for the GDC, looked up from the monitors. "Is it them? The invaders?" Elena nodded grimly. "They're already here. We don't have much time. We need to warn every nation, activate emergency protocols, and begin preparations. Whatever they're planning, we need to be ready." The GDC's emergency protocol was designed for extreme situations, a last line of defense against the unimaginable. It was a plan that had never been tested until now. Elena quickly began sending encrypted messages to world leaders, activating the emergency defense network, and coordinating the military's response. Within hours, emergency alerts were broadcast globally, warning of an imminent extraterrestrial threat. Governments scrambled to mobilize, preparing their military forces for a conflict no one had ever anticipated. Meanwhile, Alex Ramos, now working with the Global Defense Coalition's Special Forces, was preparing for the worst. His team, a mix of military veterans and technology experts, was tasked with infiltrating alien ships and sabotaging their operations. The stakes were high, and the odds were against them. But Alex knew something the Zarians didn't. Humanity had survived this long because of one thing: ingenuity. "We may not have the technology they do," Alex said to his team, "but we've got something they don't: heart. And that's what's going to save us." Across the world, people were beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. The Zarians had underestimated humanity's resilience. What they saw as a weak, unimportant species was, in fact, a force to be reckoned with. And though the invaders were strong and their fleet was vast, they had no idea just how far humanity would go to protect its home. In the cold reaches of space, Vexera prepared to make her move, but as her fleet closed in on Earth, she began to sense a shift. The humans were reacting faster than anticipated. They were preparing, not just for an invasion, but for a fight. And while the Zarians were confident in their victory, they hadn't yet learned the most valuable lesson of all: never underestimate the power of human creativity. The Zarians believed they had all the time in the world. What they didn't realize was that, in the face of extinction, The heart of humanity was stronger than any weapon they could bring to bear. And now, Earth's fight for survival was about to begin. The unseen war. The Zarians had underestimated Earth's response. They had calculated that humanity, with its disjointed leadership and limited resources, would buckle under the weight of an alien invasion. But what they failed to account for was the sheer unpredictability of the human spirit, the ability to unite in the face of overwhelming odds, to improvise, adapt, and overcome. As the Zarian fleet moved closer, humanity was beginning to mobilize in ways no one had expected. In the United Nations Space Exploration Program's headquarters, Dr. Elena Armstrong was already pushing the boundaries of what humanity's defenses could do. Satellite grids had been expanded, and research labs across the globe were scrambling to develop countermeasures against the alien technology. The initial approach was defensive, creating weapons capable of damaging or disabling the Zarian ships. But Elena knew that simply reacting wouldn't be enough. Humanity needed to be on the offensive. "It's not enough to just defend ourselves," Elena said, pacing around the control room. "We need to show them that we won't be pushed around. We need to make them understand that we're not some primitive species to be conquered." General Martin Herrera, who had been working closely with her, leaned in. "How do you propose we do that?" Elena's mind raced as she stared at the data flashing across the screens. The Zarian fleet was vast, but it was still just a fleet. There was no planet in the universe that didn't have weak points, and she was certain that Earth's scientists, engineers, and soldiers could find theirs. If the Zarians thought they could simply decimate the planet with brute force, they were gravely mistaken. "We hit them where it hurts. We target their communication networks first, take down their ability to coordinate." Elena's voice was steady, determined. "Then we infiltrate their ships. We turn their own technology against them." While the scientists worked tirelessly on defensive systems, Elena's plan quickly gained traction within the United Nations and the Global Defense Coalition. A new kind of resistance was born. A guerrilla war fought not just with guns and bombs, but with hacking, sabotage, and unparalleled human ingenuity. If the Zarians could outnumber them, Earth would outsmart them. Meanwhile, on the ground, Alex Ramos had been thrust into the heart of the action. He and his team had been chosen to spearhead the most dangerous mission of all, infiltrating the Zarian ships themselves. With the help of humanity's top engineers and scientists, they had developed technology capable of breaching the alien vessel's defenses. But even with the best tech at their disposal, Alex knew that this mission was a one-way ticket for many. "I've done some crazy stuff in my life, but this," Alex said, locking eyes with his team as they prepared to board the shuttle that would take them to the nearest Zarian ship. "This is beyond anything we've ever faced. But if we don't do this, there won't be anything left to save." His team, a mix of seasoned soldiers and elite hackers, nodded in agreement. Among them was Zora Patel, a former cyber warfare specialist with the Indian Army, who had been recruited for her unparalleled skills in penetrating foreign systems. She had already cracked encrypted alien communications, revealing that the Zarians were aware of Earth's preparations, but believed they were dealing with a primitive species whose defenses could be brushed aside. They were wrong, and Zara was determined to prove it. "We don't just need to disable their ships," Zara said, her voice calm but with an edge of steel. "We need to take control of them. We turn their ships into ours, and we make them regret ever coming here." The shuttle door hissed shut, and as it ascended into the sky, a new kind of war began. Unlike anything Earth had ever known, this was a war of brains and brawn, fought not just with weapons, but with wits. Zara was about to work her magic, breaking into the Zarians' communication network to send a message. "We are not your prey." On the front lines, the first significant battle occurred when the Zarians launched a test strike against a major city, London. Their ships, invisible to radar and equipped with weapons far beyond human comprehension, began to rain down devastation. Buildings crumbled, fires erupted, and panic spread like wildfire across the city. But Earth was ready. A coordinated strike from multiple global defense systems caught the Zarians by surprise. Earth's newly designed anti-shield missiles, powered by the last-minute work of a dozen nations' combined efforts, blasted through the Zarian ship's outer defenses. The attackers faltered. It wasn't a victory, not by a long shot, but it was a message. Earth was fighting back, and the Zarians had miscalculated just how much resistance they would encounter. Back in space, Vexera observed the attack from her command ship. Her mind raced, her thoughts at odds with the data scrolling across her console. The humans had delivered a strike that should have been impossible, breaking through the most sophisticated shield technology her people had ever designed. This wasn't part of the plan, she muttered, her fingers brushing over the command interface. They're not supposed to fight back like this. The Zarian fleet had been designed for one purpose: total dominance. The humans were supposed to be an easy conquest, their technology antiquated and their defenses laughable. But as the events unfolded, it became clear that Earth was not like other planets the Zarians had conquered. There was something different about humanity, their unpredictability, their resilience, and most terrifying of all, their unity. On Earth, the stakes had never been higher. People were living in fear, but they were also learning to adapt. It was no longer just about survival. It was about retaliation. The Zarians might have had the firepower, but Earth had the spirit. And as the days passed, the humans were proving that they were not a race to be subjugated. Alex and his team had finally breached the outer walls of the Zarian ship. They moved like shadows, silent and swift, navigating through alien corridors filled with strange symbols and technology that seemed to pulse with life. The deeper they ventured, the more alien the ship became, its walls humming with energy, its air thick with an unnatural heat. But Zara had already infiltrated the core of the ship's communications network. Her fingers danced over the holographic interface, bypassing Zarian encryption like it was child's play. The system was complex, but not impossible. Within moments, she had gained access to the command center of the Zarian ship. "It's done," Zara said, her voice barely a whisper as the rest of the team prepared to disable the ship's engines. "We have control." But their victory was short-lived. The Zarians had anticipated human ingenuity. Security systems, previously dormant, now lit up like alarms. The ship began to shudder violently, as if it was waking from a long slumber. A mechanical voice, cold and indifferent, rang through the ship's corridors. "Unauthorized access detected. Systems compromised. Initiating self-destruct sequence." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. The last thing they needed was for the Zarians to realize they were on board, but now it seemed their only chance to escape was to stop the countdown before it reached zero. "We need to get out of here. Now," Alex shouted. The team sprinted down the narrow alien hallways, dodging Zarian soldiers who now rushed toward them, weapons raised. Zara had disabled the majority of the ship's security, but the self-destruct was a failsafe they hadn't anticipated. The countdown was already at 2 minutes. As Alex and his team raced against time, they realized one undeniable truth. The Zarians had made a grave mistake. The people of Earth weren't merely surviving the invasion. They were learning, evolving, and above all, fighting back with a ferocity that no alien fleet could have prepared for. This was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a war for the future of humanity. And humanity was ready to win. The tide turns. As the Zarian ship's self-destruct countdown ticked relentlessly downward, Alex and his team fought through the maze-like interior of the alien vessel. The corridors, dimly lit by pulsating lights that gave the walls an eerie glow, seemed to close in around them. Zara led the way, hacking into the ship's systems, overriding every door, every security measure. But time was slipping away. 1 minute, Zara muttered under her breath, sweat beading on her forehead as she worked feverishly at her console. "I can't shut down the self-destruct, but I can delay it. If we don't get off this ship in the next 60 seconds, we're all dead." The team moved faster, knowing they had little time. Alex's heart raced, but there was no room for panic. His instincts had kicked in, and his years of training as a soldier had taught him how to stay calm under fire. They'd come this far, and there was no turning back now. The Zarians were closing in on them, the sounds of their heavy footfalls echoing down the halls. Alex could hear the hum of their weapons charging, but they weren't the only threat. The countdown continued, and every second felt like an eternity. "Where's the exit?" Alex shouted. "Up ahead, just past the central engine room," Zara replied. "We'll have to bypass the secondary security systems. If I can override the engines, we'll be able to make a clean escape." A sharp metallic screech cut through the air as the door to the engine room slammed shut in front of them, locking down. The ship's systems were working against them now. Zara's fingers flew across her console, but it was clear the Zarians had anticipated this move. The room was locked tight. "We need a new plan," Alex said, pulling out his weapon. "We hold them off here." But Zara shook her head, her eyes intense with urgency. "No time for that. We'll die before we even get close. The main exit is only 2 levels above us. We can't stop now. Get moving." The team regrouped and moved swiftly through the corridors, dodging Zarian patrols. The ship's layout seemed to warp in the heat of the moment, the walls appearing to twist in unfamiliar ways. But they didn't stop. They couldn't afford to stop. At the heart of the ship, Elena Armstrong's ground command center had become an epicenter of frantic activity. The shockwave of their initial success had pushed humanity's resistance into overdrive. The world was no longer just watching the battle unfold, it was taking part in it. Armies of engineers, scientists, and soldiers were fighting on the ground, supporting the efforts in space. But the most crucial part of their strategy was still underway: the launch of Earth's counterattack. Dr. Armstrong had learned that the key to defeating the Zarians lay not just in brute strength, but in understanding their psychology. The Zarians believed in absolute control. Their fleets, their technology, their tactics, they were all based on domination, on crushing resistance. They had never faced an adversary who could fight back as fiercely, as creatively, as humanity had. And Elena's strategy was to exploit that weakness. On Earth's side, massive ships were being constructed, ships not just designed for combat, but for infiltration. These ships would carry human soldiers deep into the heart of Zarian territory. And with the aid of captured Zarian technology, the humans had created new weapons that made their ships almost invisible to Zarian sensors. It wasn't just about fighting back, it was about taking the war to them. But as the final moments of the Zarian ship's countdown approached, there was a growing sense of urgency among the human resistance. The Zarians might have thought they were in control, but as Alex and his team neared their escape, they were about to witness a level of human ingenuity that would change the course of the war forever. 30 seconds, Zara said, her voice tight with fear. "I can't delay it any longer. We have to go, now." Alex's pulse thundered in his ears as he sprinted toward the exit. The Zarians were almost upon them. The sounds of their footsteps were deafening, but the team pushed forward, desperate for survival. As they reached the exit doors, Zara slammed her hand onto a control panel, and the doors finally opened, just as the countdown reached 0. There was a moment of terrifying silence, and then, boom! The explosion was deafening. The shockwave sent Alex flying backward, slamming him into the metallic walls of the ship. The entire vessel seemed to shake, as if it were collapsing in on itself. But they were already in motion. With no time to waste, Alex and his team ran as fast as they could, knowing that their lives depended on how quickly they could get to the shuttle bay. Through the chaos, Alex saw Zara's face, determination etched into every line, even as she bled from a gash on her forehead. "Move," she screamed, her voice barely audible over the hum of the explosion. The ship was breaking apart, but they weren't out of danger yet. As they reached the shuttle bay, Alex could see the Zarians pouring in from all directions, their weapons drawn. It was a final showdown. "We're not making it out of here alive unless we fight," Alex said, panting as he faced his team. There was no time for doubt, no time for second-guessing. This was it. Zara gave him a grim smile. "We fight, or we die." The team braced themselves. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about sending a message to the Zarians. Humanity would never bow down. The Zarians fired first, but Alex and his team were faster. The air was filled with the crackle of energy blasts as their weapons collided with the alien soldiers. But it was the humans' ingenuity that turned the tide. Zara, her fingers still tapping away on her console, hacked into the Zarian weapon systems, causing their guns to malfunction at the most crucial moments. In the midst of the firefight, Alex saw the shuttle ahead, its engines already primed for takeoff. With a roar, he charged forward, drawing his weapon and firing at the Zarian soldiers, blocking their path. Every movement felt like an eternity, but they were getting closer. Finally, the shuttle's ramp was lowered, and Alex and his team dove inside, quickly securing the doors. The Zarians were too late. With a roar of engines, the shuttle shot forward, blasting through the crumbling ship's atmosphere as the Zarian vessel exploded in a blaze of fire and debris behind them. But as Alex looked out into the vastness of space, the weight of what they had just done began to sink in. They had taken a monumental risk, one that could have cost them everything. But it had worked. They had infiltrated the Zarian ship, disabled its systems, and lived to tell the tale. And more importantly, they had struck a blow to the Zarians that they would not soon forget. As the shuttle raced toward the safety of Earth, Alex's mind was already turning to the next phase of the war. The Zarians were not finished, and neither were they. Humanity's fight had only just begun. The tide was turning, and the Zarians were about to learn the true meaning of human resilience. They had underestimated humanity, but now they would see what the cost of that mistake was. The price of victory. The shuttle hurtled through the void of space, its engines roaring as it made its way toward Earth. Inside, the team was silent, each person lost in their thoughts. The adrenaline of the battle had faded, but the weight of what they had just accomplished hung heavily in the air. They had escaped the Zarian ship just in time, but the victory felt hollow. The explosion behind them had been a triumph, but the cost was still unknown. Alex sat in the cockpit, staring at the stars outside. His mind raced. They had struck a blow against the Zarians, but there were so many unanswered questions. How would the Resistance respond to the news of their success? Would humanity be ready for the war that was about to unfold? "We did it." Zara's voice broke the silence. She was seated at the communication station, her fingers hovering over the controls. But at what cost? Alex didn't have an answer. The exhilaration of escaping the Zarian ship had faded, replaced by a sinking feeling. How many more battles would it take before they could defeat the Zarians? And at what cost would their victory come? "We got out, but we still have to finish what we started," Alex said, his voice steady, though his thoughts were anything but. "Earth can't keep fighting this war alone. We need more allies." "You think the Federation will step in?" Zara asked, looking up from her console. "The way things are going, we might not even make it to the negotiation table." Alex was silent for a moment, considering the possibilities. The Federation, the interstellar alliance that had once been a beacon of hope for all races, had been fractured in the years leading up to the Zarian invasion. Political turmoil, economic collapse, and infighting had weakened their resolve, making them a shadow of their former selves. It was unclear whether they could be counted on to support Earth in its time of need. "I don't know," Alex replied, the uncertainty in his voice betraying his calm exterior. "But we have no choice but to try." Back on Earth, Lena Armstrong paced restlessly in her command center, staring at the large holographic display that showed the battle unfolding in real time. The Resistance had pushed back, but the Zarians were relentless. The tide of war was still shifting, and humanity was struggling to keep up. "We need reinforcements," Elena muttered to herself. "And we need them now." The battle for Earth was becoming more desperate by the day. The Zarians had adapted quickly, deploying new technologies that were wreaking havoc on Earth's defenses. Despite their initial victories, the human resistance was being pushed to the brink. Alina knew that they had to make a bold move if they were going to stand a chance. The Zarians were ruthless, but they were also predictable. They believed in control, in domination. If they could find a way to break that control, to turn the Zarians' own strengths against them, humanity might have a chance. But time was running out. The resistance had lost key outposts, and morale was beginning to falter. She needed to act fast, but the decision she was about to make would not come without consequences. "Zara," Alina said, her voice sharp with resolve, as she activated the encrypted comms channel. "We need you back on Earth. I've got a plan." Back on the shuttle, the team received Alina's message loud and clear. The gravity of the situation hit them all at once. "She wants us back on Earth?" Zara asked, disbelief creeping into her voice. "After everything we just did?" Alex nodded, his jaw set. "If there's one thing we've learned, it's that the Zarians don't stop. We can't just sit back and wait for reinforcements. We need to take the fight to them, just like we did with the ship," Zara said, the idea slowly sinking in. "But this time, we'll be on the ground." The plan was ambitious, risky, and dangerous. Alina's strategy was to infiltrate the Zarian military command on Earth, to find a way to strike at the heart of their operations. She believed that if they could cripple the Zarian command structure, the rest of their forces would begin to collapse. But it wouldn't be easy. The Zarians had entrenched themselves deeply on Earth, their presence woven into every level of society. They had spies, operatives, and collaborators everywhere. A direct assault would be suicide, and a covert operation would require precision, speed, and an almost perfect level of secrecy. And that was where Alex and his team came in. "You'll need to infiltrate Zarian command," Alina said in the briefing, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of the decision. "We've managed to secure intelligence that will guide you to their central network. But it's not just a physical location. They've infiltrated our government, our communications, everything. You'll need to operate with a level of secrecy we've never attempted before." Alex exchanged a glance with Zara. The mission was clear, but its scope was overwhelming. This wasn't just a battle for Earth's survival, it was a battle for the future. But they couldn't back down now. They had already committed themselves to this war, and turning back was never an option. The team prepared for what was sure to be their most dangerous mission yet. Alex knew that if they succeeded, it could turn the tide of the war. But if they failed, it would likely be the last mission they ever undertook. Meanwhile, back on the surface of Earth, the Zarians were tightening their grip. With every passing day, their forces grew stronger, their control more absolute. They had already begun relocating civilians, clearing out entire cities to make way for their operations. Resistance fighters had become a minority, with many either dead or in hiding. Yet, humanity's will to survive was not easily extinguished. The world had come together in a way it never had before. People who had once fought each other now found themselves working side by side, putting aside old grievances for the sake of a common cause. The entire world had become a battleground, and humanity's resolve was being tested like never before. "We're running out of time," Alina said, glancing at the holographic map as the countdown to the next major Zarian offensive ticked away. "They'll be launching their full-scale assault soon. We need Alex and the team to move now." Back in space, Alex and his team had reached the outskirts of Earth's atmosphere. The shuttle shook as it descended, turbulence from the atmosphere rattling the hull. Zara manned the controls, but even her steady hands couldn't prevent the tension in the air. "We're almost there," she said, her voice strained. "Get ready." Alex felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He knew that once they set foot on Earth, they would be part of a war unlike anything they had ever known. The stakes were higher now, and failure was not an option. The shuttle broke through the atmosphere, the blue and green of Earth sprawling out before them. But Alex wasn't looking at the beauty of the planet. His eyes were focused on the task at hand. They had to act fast. The Zarians were everywhere, and they could not afford to be discovered. This mission was about survival, and more than that, it was about humanity's hope. As the shuttle landed, Alex exhaled slowly. The weight of their mission hung heavily over him. There was no turning back. The time for hiding was over. The war had come home. The final gambit. The shuttle touched down softly on Earth's surface, the hum of the engines cutting off as the landing gear settled into the damp soil. The world outside was eerily quiet. There was no welcoming party, no fanfare, just the oppressive silence of a world under occupation. Earth had become a battleground, its cities ravaged by Zarian forces and its people pushed to the brink of despair. But amidst it all, there was still a flicker of defiance, and Alex and his team were now the spark that would light the fire. "Remember," Alex said, his voice low but steady, "we're in enemy territory. Every step we take is a risk. No room for mistakes." Zara nodded. Her eyes narrowed as she surveyed the surroundings. The air was thick with tension, and every rustle of the wind made them jump. The Zarians had eyes everywhere. Hidden drones, surveillance satellites, and spies embedded deep within the population. Trust would be a luxury they couldn't afford. "Let's move," said Zara, checking the weapons at her side before leading the way. The team followed, silent and swift, moving through the shadows of Earth's darkened forests to avoid detection. Their objective was clear: infiltrate Zarian Command, find the central control hub, and neutralize the heart of their operations. But nothing about this mission was going to be easy. Back at the heart of Zarian control, the enemy was preparing for their final push. Deep in the heart of what had once been a thriving human metropolis now turned fortress, the Zarians were assembling their forces, preparing to stamp out any remaining pockets of resistance. Their next move would be a full-scale assault, an overwhelming wave that would break humanity's final defenses. But the Zarians had underestimated humanity's resolve. Elena Armstrong was already entrenched in the heart of the resistance, her face grim as she watched the massive holographic display showing the incoming Zarian forces. Their strength was unimaginable. Militarized fleets, drones, and advanced technology that humanity had never seen before. It would be the war to end all wars unless they could pull off their final plan. But for that to happen, Alex and his team needed to succeed. The fate of Earth rested in their hands. "We'll be ready," Elena muttered to herself. "We've fought too long, too hard to let this be the end." Alex's team navigated the ruins of what was once a thriving city. The echoes of a world that had once been filled with life now lay in ruins, a grim reminder of the cost of the war. Buildings that had stood for centuries were now nothing more than charred skeletons, their glass windows shattered by the relentless bombardment of the Zarian forces. "This place was beautiful," Zara whispered as they ducked behind a fallen column. "It's hard to believe what it's become." "We don't have time for nostalgia," Alex replied, his voice sharp with urgency. "We have a job to do." The team moved quickly, blending into the shadows. Their every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. They couldn't afford to be caught. If the Zarians discovered them, there would be no escape. But as they neared their target, something unexpected happened. A lone Zarian scout, a member of the alien race tasked with maintaining surveillance over the area, spotted them. "Get down," Alex hissed, grabbing Zara and pulling her into cover. The team dropped to the ground, holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable. The scout didn't see them. He had passed too close, but had missed them by mere inches. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he remained still, not daring to move until the scout disappeared into the distance. "That was too close," Zara muttered, her voice trembling with a mixture of relief and adrenaline. "We can't keep doing this. We need a plan." Alex nodded. "The plan hasn't changed. We push forward." As the team continued their journey toward the Zarian command center, they had to be mindful of every step. The Zarians were no longer just an occupying force. They were hunting them, actively searching for any signs of resistance. Humanity had been pushed into the corner, and the fight for survival had become a game of cat and mouse. Back in the heart of the resistance, Alina was preparing for the worst. The Zarians were coming. The final assault was imminent, and her people were ready to fight to the last. But deep inside, she knew that the key to victory lay in the success of Alex and his team. As the hours passed, the tension on the ground and in the sky thickened. Alina's heart raced as she stared at the holographic map of Earth's cities. The Zarians were making their move, deploying forces in every direction. The resistance was outmatched, outnumbered, but they were determined. And then, just as the first wave of Zarian ships began to descend on Earth, a signal flickered on Alina's console. A brief message came through, encrypted, but unmistakably clear. "We're in. Going for the core." Alina's eyes widened. They were in. Inside the Zarian command center, Alex and his team had breached the outer defenses. Their stealth and precision had paid off. The Zarians were still unaware of their presence, but the clock was ticking. They had reached the heart of the operation, an imposing structure deep within the ruins of the old city. The central hub of the Zarians' control network loomed before them, a massive facility shielded by layers of force fields and heavy security. It was humanity's last hope. If they could take this down, the Zarians' hold over Earth would falter. "This is it," Alex said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Once we go in, there's no turning back." Zara gave a nod, her face hardening with resolve. "We're not leaving without finishing this." The team moved swiftly through the corridors, bypassing security and evading detection. They had trained for this moment, but nothing had prepared them for the sheer magnitude of the task ahead. The core of the Zarian operations was not just a physical location, it was the nerve center of their entire campaign. Inside, the air was thick with energy. The hum of the machinery, the steady beep of sensors, and the distant clatter of Zarian soldiers filled the space. Alex's heart raced as they navigated the labyrinthine halls, their steps light but determined. Finally, they'd reached the core, a massive, pulsating chamber at the center of the facility. The core was surrounded by a network of controls and machines, each one humming with a dark, alien energy. The Zarians had tapped into technology that humanity couldn't even begin to comprehend. "Here goes nothing," Alex muttered, activating the explosive charges that had been carefully placed around the room. The countdown began. As the timer ticked away, Alex and his team took positions. They knew that when the bomb went off, the explosion would send shockwaves through the entire Zarian network, disabling their control over the planet. 5 seconds, Zara said, her voice calm despite the chaos. Alex felt the tension in the air. Time seemed to slow down as the seconds counted down. They had given everything for this moment. There was no turning back. 3, 2, 1. The explosion ripped through the facility, the shockwave vibrating through the walls. The core of the Zarian network shattered, and with it, the Zarians' control over Earth. The pulse of their power flickered, and for the first time in years, humanity had a fighting chance. Back on Earth, Alina's console beeped urgently. The message was clear: target neutralized, core destroyed. The resistance had won. Alex and his team had done it. They had crippled the Zarian command structure. The tide of the war had shifted, and Earth, though battered and bruised, stood ready to fight again. The war was far from over, but the first step toward victory had been taken.